Guy Nespiner in Auckland, Kim Hill in Wellington. Briefings to the new government's ministers have highlighted a series of problems they'll have to deal with. The documents were made public last week and show, among other things, Auckland's housing shortage steadily become worse over the last 9 years. City now short by 45,000 homes. Demand for social housing has skyrocketed, increasing by 72% in the last 2 years. The primary health system completely missing some of the most vulnerable people. And pressures on New Zealand's natural resources are reaching a critical point. Bill English, the leader of the National Party, former Prime Minister, is in our Wellington studio. Morena.
Good morning.
That's a bad report card, don't you think?
No, I disagree with that. Look, these are just the challenges of government. The country's never going to be perfect, and any number of those issues have had intensive work over recent years.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Why haven't they got a better showing?
Well, I'll give you an example. Environmental constraints. There's now a national testing system in place for water quality. Everyone agrees it's what should be used. While the new government campaigned against it, they will have to use it. We're ready. The country's ready to make significant progress on it. In fact, recent reports from Canterbury published show that water quality is improving in a number of rivers where it had been getting worse for years. So the government's in a good position to be able to take these things forward positively.
Doesn't that fly in the fact there's a crisis in water quality? We've been told there's a crisis in water quality.
Well, that's because you haven't taken any notice of all the intensive hard work and investment that's been going on in the rural areas. Now the focus is shifting to the urban areas. There's been a lot of work go on there too, in recognition of the fact that our water infrastructure was the least well managed of all our infrastructure. And so local government New Zealand and the central government has been working on that for 3 or 4 years. And again, the understanding of the issues is much better. There's a great opportunity to take it forward. We
have a deficit of, 71,000 houses?
Oh, look, that's a theoretical calculation.
What isn't theoretical, Mr. English, is that $21.5 million have been spent on emergency housing grants in the 6 months to September. Doesn't that show mismanagement?
It shows there was very strong demand with strong population growth for housing.
Well,
there's more houses being built now than there have been for decades. The construction industry is running.
There's more need for them now.
Yes, there is, and the construction industry is running flat out. It is running absolutely flat out, as fast as it can go, building houses and building infrastructure. The government's now promised to build an additional 100,000 houses. They haven't got a dog show of doing that.
Soaring prison population, despite your best efforts?
That's right, and that is going to be a real challenge. Because on the one hand, there's a high expectation of public safety. For instance, you may remember some big controversies about prisoners who were on bail committing very serious crimes. The court system is now quite risk-averse about bail, so there's a growing number of prisoners on remand. That's a response to public expectations of public safety, but it is growing the numbers, as are longer sentences.
Was there anything in those briefings where you thought, yeah, that's right, we could have done better on that one?
Oh, you can always do better.
Well, exactly.
But there's nothing in there. There's nothing in there that's new. Well, I wish we'd done better on prison numbers. It's a very hard problem. But look, the government is in a great position to deal with the ongoing pressures that go with the social challenges as well as the economic growth. They've got a strong economy. They've got good government's books. They're starting to make some dumb choices that are going to make it hard for them. But they don't have any excuses for not being able to make progress.
Well, they do. Apparently, according to Phil Twyford, for example, you've left them with a big mess on the housing front. He would say that, wouldn't he? But it does look messy.
No, there is nothing new in the briefings about housing that hasn't been debated intensively for 3 or 4 years.
What is new in the briefings, it seems to me, is a comment from our security service chiefs over expressing concern in the past about Beijing's political influence. They have briefed Ms. Ardern and Mr. Little to that effect. Did they ever express concern to you about Beijing's influence?
I'm not going to discuss what they briefed me about.
Well, why don't you? Because what they also say in the briefing is that we think a wider dialogue with the public on a regular basis and covering a wide range of national security issues would be a good idea. So why don't you break the ice on that one?
Well, look, it's up to them. They're the agency working to the government.
And that's what they're recommending?
Well, they're the agency working to the government. They'll decide what they do. The issue of foreign influence is nothing new in New Zealand. It used to be the Russians they were worried about. At various times, New Zealanders have been worried about the Americans. Now there's been public concern about the Chinese. That's why you have security services to make, and they've been bolstered significantly in the last 4 or 5 years. The legislation's all been changed. We were worried about the Kim.com influence there for a while. The legislation's all been changed. The resources are now much better. They're in a good position to deal with excessive foreign influence from anywhere.
You would have taken some interest in Australia's proposed legislation?
Yes.
To stop foreign powers wielding soft power, it'll ban foreign political donations, a new transparency scheme to force foreign agents to list who they work for. Do we have that here?
We have a very...
Do we have that here?
No, we don't have
Why
that
not?
here. Well, because we have a transparent political donations regime, which was thoroughly discussed and thoroughly tested. It's in place. If people are trying to influence New Zealand politics through donations, then they have to be declared.
See, earlier this year we learned that one of your MPs, Jan Young, had studied at a Chinese spy school before moving to New Zealand in 1999. Chances are he was an officer in Chinese military intelligence. We didn't know anything about that, and we still know very little because we weren't given that information. Were you?
As we've discussed a number of times before, he declared his background when he became a candidate for the National Party, but before that, he became a New Zealand citizen over a decade ago. He is a New Zealand citizen. He fulfilled the requirements that was inquired into.
It seems that we are taking soft power wielded by any government, including the Chinese government, of course, a great deal less seriously than the Australians. Do you think that will have to change?
I don't think that is the case. I don't agree with it. As I said, part of the point of having intelligence services is precisely to ensure that foreign influence on our affairs is limited, and our intelligence services are in good shape to deal with it.
And yet the security chiefs do not seem to agree with that. They say that they have concerns over Beijing's political influence in New Zealand and in Australia as they experienced a surge in political activity from people who allege ties to China's Communist Party as their Chinese-born population surge. That's the problem. That's the problem perceived in Australia. Why wouldn't it be a problem here? Are we being naive, Mr. English?
No, we're not. As I said, the security services are set up to do this. All that's happening here really is they're being a bit more open about what is core business of security agencies in New Zealand and has been for a long, long time.
They've called for a more vocal government response to these threats. They're not saying everything's fine. They're saying something more needs to be done.
Well, no one said everything's fine. I'm saying they are set up to do it, and actually calling for political response from a security agency calling for political response is overstretching what they've said, and I don't believe they would regard that as appropriate, nor would a government.
You see, the suspicion is that we are a great deal more relaxed, shall we say, about possible political influence from China because we rely on it for our trade and for our tourism. We are afraid to offend. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't. I think we have a sound, balanced attitude. That is, there is a strong economic relationship with China. We have a strong security relationship with the US. Part of the task for the government of a small country is to negotiate the relationships with both of those large countries, who are sometimes in conflict and sometimes work together, with due regard to New Zealand, ultimately to New Zealand's interests. So, with respect to foreign influence on New Zealand, as I've said, security agencies are set up to deal with that. You've got to be a bit careful about overstressing the problem. There's all sorts of external influences on New Zealand. Greenpeace, it's a global NGO. We get caught up in their international campaigns, Amnesty International.
Greenpeace doesn't have its own media at large in New Zealand. Does it not worry that the Chinese language media here is more and more aligned with the Chinese government views?
Well,
is that not exactly what soft power is?
That is those are potentially uses of soft power. The question there is, what influence are they actually having?
What's your answer?
Well, I've been in government for 9 years. And the new government will deal with all the same issues, and that is, it's just another aspect of the diplomatic relationship with a country with whom we have a strong economic interest. We have, what about Australian soft power? I mean, they own our banks and insurance companies. Of course, that has an influence on how decisions get made. So I think we've got to be a bit careful about overstressing this particular version, when over the years New Zealand's always had to deal with foreign influence on its policy coming from all sorts of places, and New Zealanders take pride in the independence of our way of dealing with foreign influence.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. The Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of National Party, Bill English. It's 12 and a half minutes to 8 now.